In many wars, most of them really, you can find humans. They are quick, nimble, precise, and merciless. They dart around the battlefield or in the rear lines, scrambling like mad as they search for the wounded. Then they pounce. You can scream all you like, beg them to stop, to put you out of your misery, but they'll simply ignore it as they get to their grim task, leaving you to stare helplessly at the white circle surrounding two intertwined red snakes. When asked how they could hear a victim begging for death and yet not relent, and even make the pain worse, I remember hearing one say, "You have to remember the 3 Ps. Pain is the patient's problem." Yes, in most every war you will find humans running around the battlefields, healing the wounded. They don't care about your species, your rank, nor even which side of the war you are on. A Hygna screamer or a Randra soldier, an Itrin general or Bunurian prisoner conscript. If they are injured, a human will spare no effort in trying to save them. And they're good at it too. Not that there aren't others in the galaxy whose medical advancements aren't almost as good. However, these factions treat them as closely guarded secrets, while the humans share their knowledge openly. They practically train entire armies, arming them with the best medical equipment they have, before letting them go where they will to do what they can. Then came the war between my people, the Ralstari, and the Turgavins. Like always, humans were there, though you could tell they were a little more tense. The Turgavins have always held the humans, and their way of healing others, in contempt. To come onto the battlefield and not fight was, as they saw it, nothing but cowardice. They refused to allow humans within their ranks, and while the Turgavins officially honoured intergalactic law and did not target the healers, somehow human deaths resulting from collateral damage were always much higher whenever their armies took the field. In our conflict, this seemed even more the case. It was as though the Turgavins were going out of their way to ensure human casualties, and grumblings among the prisoners we captured claimed that humans were secretly aiding us in the war, and that the healers were fighting alongside us. It was nonsense, of course. Well, you could say that it was technically true. They were only beside us in the role of healers, not as warriors. Yet the grumblings persisted. The Turgavins' harassment of the humans intensified, and then one day, all pretense was finally dropped. Before the entire Galactic Union Assembly, the Turgavin representative officially accused humanity of fighting alongside us Ralstari on the battlefield. For evidence, they showed a carefully cropped still image of a human holding a small gun up to a Turgavin soldier. They barely showed it for a minute before switching to a picture of the same soldier laying on a slab, a hole in his head that they claimed came from the human's weapon. None believed it. Mind you, it wasn't that they were shocked, they literally didn't believe it. We were simply too familiar with the Turgavin propaganda, their carefully edited evidence. Even if the human had shot the Turgavin, it was likely in self-defense. While the image of the healer had only been shown briefly, and even that had been carefully edited, it was enough for me to note that he looked pained. That the picture of the slain Turgavin wasn't from the same area also aroused suspicion. However, whether anyone believed it or not was ultimately irrelevant. The Turgavin had their excuse now and swore that all humans encountered on the battlefield would be treated as enemy combatants acting in violation of intergalactic law. The human ambassador protested, as did others, but the Turgavin representative has said all he had come to say, and simply left. Despite these political dealings, however, the humans remained on the battlefield. They were more wary now, staying closer to our squads for protection, but kept healing both us and any wounded Turgavins they found. It was astonishing, really, as the Turgavins considered them to be acting in violation of intergalactic law. The law surrounding their safety and treatment in the event of capture no longer applied to them. And yet they continued healing, continued what they considered to be their sacred mission. That was until the attack on their colony of Venice. Now, before I continue, no, it is likely not the Venice you're thinking of. For everything that can be said in praise for humans, they seem to be terribly bad at coming up with names for anything. There were no less than a dozen or so planets, moons, asteroids, and artificial habitats named Paris, or some variation of York. On most of these, there are at least a dozen or so cities that have the same name as well. We at first thought that they were just really proud of the history of these places, only to find out most of the humans don't even know where the name originates from. Where was I? Ah yes, the attack on Venice. Venice was a planet on the edge of human territory near our borders, and was the central logistics hub for all of their support up until that point. Personnel would rotate in and out of there on their way to our battlefields or when returning home. Medical supplies and equipment would also be stockpiled there prior to being sent out. They even held training seminars and refresher courses for those preparing to go out in order to ensure they were familiar with our physiology and mesmerize the most up-to-date treatment methods for various forms of injury or ailment. The Turgavins obviously could not allow such a place to exist, and initiated a planetary sterilization bombardment from orbit. Ordinarily, such an act would be in violation of intergalactic law, but the Turgavins once again used the excuse that human healers were violating intergalactic law and secretly acting as combatants. They then claimed that Venice was being used to train them, as well as secretly smuggle weapons and materials to us, and as a result, the colony was likewise no longer protected by intergalactic law. This gave them the excuse they wanted, allowing them free rein to do as they wished. Upon learning of the decimation of Venice, the human ambassador was apoplectic. Even in all of his righteous fury, however, he begged for the Assembly to be the one to act, to come together as a united force to punish the Turgavins. Indeed, there was no doubt many who wanted to, for while Venice was technically within humanity's borders, it would be wrong to call the colony a human world. They accepted other species without reservation, whether for trade or training, labor or services, or simply to visit. Humans have long since lost the place of the majority species on the planet. It's doubtful they were even the plurality. Had it been anyone else, those other species would have quickly rallied to punish the offender. However, it was the Turgavins. While they weren't necessarily the most powerful military force in the galaxy, their tech was good enough, and they had a great many numbers. They couldn't rival the Volban or Hugna swarms. Who could? But their troops were much better trained and equipped than those literal meat waves, though used in a not too dissimilar manner, if one was being honest. Their underhanded methods also frightened the other races into silence. Not just the destruction of Venice either. Even my people fell victim to their machinations. We had the foresight to openly declare war on the Turgavins in front of the Assembly before they initiated their attack, preventing them from trying to frame us as a rogue entity. Though this also had the effect of technically making us the aggressors in the conflict, officially at least, greatly restricting what aid others could offer. It was this carefully manipulated maneuver that had allowed them to act against humanity as they had. So the human ambassador, for all his righteous fury, could do little more than beg and plead before an assembly too scared to do little more than mildly reprimand the Turgavin representative. He seemed saddened by this, but not surprised. I still remember watching the broadcast and the words he spoke next. I suspect I shall remember them until my dying day. Very well. I want this assembly to know. Humanity does not hold anyone else accountable. We shall not blame you for your inertia. What comes next is not your fault, but we will see justice done. I had watched this while in my hospital bed, having been wounded in my last rotation. Quite by coincidence, my doctor was a human. I would later learn she had received a recall order to return to their borders, as their safety in other territories could not be guaranteed, and yet refused. She was in my room as the broadcast played, and had seemed troubled by it. Indeed, humans were known healers, not warriors. It wasn't their lack of claws or scales, nor their somewhat small stature that made them so, but their lack of soldiers and warships. How could she not be concerned? Her people were diving headlong into a war they seemed ill-prepared to fight. How did you get so good at healing? I asked, trying to lighten the atmosphere a bit, take her mind away from the news. Lots of training, she responded simply, turning her attention to a device that held my medical history. I know a lot of others simply get a neural implant and have it downloaded into their brain, but I feel like you miss the heart of the knowledge if you do it that way. Our medical board seems to agree. They require us to prove our knowledge and skills even when our implants are offline. Must work, I responded. You humans are the best healers in the galaxy. We've had lots of practice, she replied, and I noticed her tone seemed a bit downcast. Yeah. There are quite a lot of wars in the galaxy, aren't there? She flashed a melancholy smile at me as she turned towards the screen, a banner announcing "Humanity declares war on Tagavins" scrolling across it. Long before that, I fear. I didn't understand what she meant. I soon would. The war ended before I was cleared to return to active duty. Not because my injuries were so severe. It only took me a handful of months before I was arguably in better shape than I had ever been. However, in that time, the Tagavins had been soundly defeated by humanity. Thinking back, how are we being so blissfully unaware of just what they were capable of? The speed and swiftness to maneuver nimbly over adverse terrain, the strength to do so even while carrying a Galgak over their shoulder, the unnerving stealth that allowed them to move through the battlefield like ghosts, and the determination to be willing to charge headfirst into an artillery barrage for the sake of their goal. Give that a gun and a clear enemy, and may the gods have mercy. For our healers are merciless, whether they're treating wounds or making them.